So what I want to do now is basically turn things over to Bev and to Michelle. What she's going to do is educate you a little bit about what they have here, and then we're going to do tastings at the tables so that everybody can kind of determine what you'd like, and then we're going to open up some bottles and have a good time. This evening we do have a featured speaker, Scott Walker, this gentleman here. It's very time appropriate for this. When I realized we were going to have this party at December 4th in 2012, 1 week ahead of the Battle of Fredericksburg 150 years ago. So I decided we would try to make this a little bit special. It's not going to be all about money, which, you know, that's normally what I talk about 24 hours a day. So what we want to do now is actually give some perspective with what it was like, you know, right before the battle. I thought that was unique. And then what we will do is actually have some hors d'oeuvres, have some wine, and then we'll also have a question and answer session about the markets. So does that sound fair? Everybody going to have a good time with that? So what we want to do is for everybody to have, number one, a good time. Number two, learn a little bit about wine. Number three, learn about the Civil War. And number four, you know, how do we handle our money moving forward? Thank you all. Appreciate everybody showing up. We're probably going to have some more folks straggling in as we go along. Folks, if you find something that you like out of this tasting, please feel free to step up and come get a glass, okay? So enjoy yourselves. Well, not just one. You can have several, you know, if you like several different types. Thank you very much. This is something that you don't get every day, I can tell you that. It's, and one thing I wanted to kind of say thank you to was we have had a fantastic year at Deacon Wealth Management, and we want to thank everybody in this room because you're all friends of Deacon Wealth. If you came here with a friend, you're a friend of ours. Okay, so thank you. What we did this year, in lieu of sending out Christmas cards, we actually made a donation to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I think they do a lot of good work. So, you know, if you get a chance, just take a look at this. This is actually made to the Friends of Deacon Wealth, which I thought was kind of cool. So, again, just wanted to thank you for that. Now I'm going to turn you loose on the food and the wine. Everybody kind of mingle for a little bit, and then we're going to come back and reconvene here in a few minutes, and we're going to bring up our guest speaker. And if you've got any questions in the meantime, please feel free to you know, ask me or any of us. I find that I'm remiss, ladies and gentlemen. We're at a winery, and I did not propose a toast. Folks, again, 2012 has been a wonderful year for us. It's because of folks like you. We're only as good as our reputation. You guys are the ones that help us make our reputation. And I just want to wish you all happy holidays, a very wonderful Christmas, a great new year, and cheers. And now, as they say, on with the show. Can you tell what our theme is tonight? Theme is history. And unfortunately, there's a lot of my own personal history in this room. Lots of people that have literally known me since I was born, who are telling stories about me. And, you know, the sooner people leave, the better off I'll be. So, not encouraging you to leave, but just don't talk about me. The entire theme kind of developed because I received what I consider to be a wonderful honor. I was asked to manage some money for a historical society that's local to this area. And I'm fourth generation from this area, which is really, that's something that you don't see very often around here anymore. In fact, you know, Scott came here, what, 43 years ago?
Yeah, that makes me a newcomer.
Yeah, he's still a come here. A little housekeeping. This is technically a financial program in that I am a financial advisor. Therefore, we are required by FINRA, the SEC. How many other organizations would we like to name out there? So please sign in because we do need to have a record that you've been here because this is not a financial topic per se, but we will be answering questions about the markets thereafter. We're going to have an open forum, just question and answer session. You guys can pick my brain, slim as that picking may be. I'm a Fredericksburg resident for 43 years and worked in Stafford schools for over 30 years. He's the president and board member of the historic Fredericksburg Foundation, past president of the Civil War Roundtable of Fredericksburg, scholarship chair of the Rappahannock Valley Civil War Roundtable, life member of the Central Virginia's Battlefields Trust, and member of the Washington Heritage Museums Group. Let me take a breath. We're only about halfway through. Friends of the Wilderness Battlefield, the National Civil War Trust, National Trust for Historic Preservation, owner of Hallowed Ground Tours, and a partner in Heritage Media LLC. And if you guys don't know what Heritage Media LLC is, I became acquainted with them a few years ago. This DVD is called The Civil War Fredericksburg, Then and Now. He is seen as the on-screen host of Heritage Media's local cable television show, History Scene. He believes that learning accurate history does not have to be boring or exaggerated. But be careful, okay? In 2011, while speaking about preservation to a local group, he asked, upon finishing his remarks, the standard, "Are there any questions?" At that point, the summer earthquake hit. Thus, the watchword in a local historic community is, when Scott Walker speaks, the earth moves. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Scott Walker.
You know, in school, I bet I could take a blind test, God forbid that test. And unfortunately, history is the thing that comes up that you didn't like the most. And we, each and every one of you, live in the middle of it. I mean, and it's human nature. We live there, we drive past these things every day, and we either ignore them, or, oh, I know that. I've been there. And what my major goal is, whenever I'm with local folks, is to make everybody think, gee, I didn't know that. And we've talked about, well, all right, 150 years ago, they're building up to a big battle here. The Fredericksburg, Stafford, Spotsylvania area was in the middle of it. Why? Because it didn't matter in those days whether you wore a blue or a gray uniform. If you were an officer, you were trained in one place, West Point. And you were trained in the art of warfare like Napoleon fought. War is a big chess game. Capture the king. Capture the capital. Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsylvania sat right in the middle. The Union capital from here, 40 miles that way. The Confederate capital, 60 miles that way. And it just, the Confederate President Jefferson Davis used the phrase, you've heard the phrase, right place, the wrong time. He said Fredericksburg just happened to be in the right place. Now, there is no test at the end of this, and I'm not going to take the full hour and a half that Darrell gave me. But let's try to think what's here, what you drive past, and yes, that you probably think we all know. 2.5 weeks ago, like around mid-November, 150 years ago, right down that road out there, marched the Middle Grand Division of the Union Army of the Potomac under command of a guy that we hear of the rest of the Civil War, a guy named Joseph Hooker. And they camped around Heartwood Church. I mean, you're right in the middle of that here tonight. By the 19th of November, part of the Confederate Army under General James Longstreet had arrived in Fredericksburg. That's the other side of the river. But here's the thing. In a battle between a total of 110,000 soldiers on this side of the river, 35,000 on the other, who should win that battle? And then, because Darrell kind of threw it out, said, hey, what happened 150 years ago? 150 years ago yesterday, the rest of the Confederate Army arrived in Fredericksburg. And if you've ever been down Route 217 toward Bowling Green near the Country Club, on the right going southward, there's a huge farm. It's called the Slaughter Pen Farm. And you look in the distance over the railroad tracks, and there's a ridge. And that's where Jackson was. And he arrived 150 years ago yesterday. But still, you've got 110,000 soldiers on this side of the river, the Union Army of the Potomac. About 70,000 guys on the other side of the river, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. Who should win that fight? But they were so ingrained on how to fight, they didn't know it. Well, what that means, to put it in perspective with today, there were more soldiers here on both sides than the country today has had in both Iraq and Afghanistan. See, gee, I didn't know that. But isn't that what history is? And I see, you know, back when I knew John Allen originally, I had dark hair. For Jim, too. But it's stories. And ladies, gosh, sometimes I get these guys. I get law firms that want to spend 3 days on a battle. You know, the 32nd Alabama Gravediggers were here on the morning of the 13th, moved 4.5 yards to the north-northwest at 8:33 a.m., and by then, they're asleep. And what I think means something to each of us are the stories from then. Yes, in 1776 we began the revolution that created the country, but in 1861 to 65 we fought a war that actually made our country. And most of it happened right here. So here you are, December 4th, 1862. The Union Army's trying to figure how to get at those guys on the other side of the river blocking their way to Richmond. All the Union general had said to President Lincoln he had to do, get to Fredericksburg, cross the river, go on to Richmond. That's all he had to do. But when he said that, there were only 600 Confederates in Fredericksburg. Well, they're getting ready to fight. If you are a resident of Stafford in 1862, here's what your life's been like. It's been totally disrupted since April, because that's when the Union Army first arrived, not having anything to do with the battle. They were here on guard duty, 30,000 guards. It's during that time, to use something Darrell said, but that Abraham Lincoln came to Stafford County on the second of 6 visits to this county. And he had a meal at Chatham Manor. He crossed the river into Fredericksburg, making it one of only 2 Confederate cities that he ever visited. The other, of course, was Richmond at the end of the war. And so you've got in Stafford County that huge manor, Chatham, that is the only residence in this country that in their day both Washington and Lincoln visited. Think about that. And so they were here. They went away and fought other battles. They fought for the second time at Manassas in a battle that was probably heard from right here. You could hear the artillery from this spot because it's only 35 miles away. But then we move forward to December. A southern state. I'm giving you 100 days to say, well, whoops, I want back in, or all the slaves in your state are free. September 22nd was the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. But Stafford County was already participating in that, in what was called self-emancipation. From the moment the Union Army arrived here in April, Stafford County became Union territory, free. And slaves from Louisa, Orange, Spotsylvania, Culpeper made their way to Fredericksburg, crossed the Rappahannock River into Stafford, and made their way out to Aquia Landing, where they caught a boat and went northward to freedom. Over 10,000 slaves, perhaps as many as 15,000, did this self-emancipation. And we're only finding this out within the last 6 years. And today, Darrell pointed out Stafford County Tourism, they've actually marked the Trail to Freedom. And you can drive that today. They had to walk it. but you're in the middle of it. So, back to December 4th, 1862. Everybody's here. Everybody's getting ready to fight. And whoops, on December 5th, there's a snowstorm. So right away, there's a difference. We know that because it was such a snowstorm that it delayed the battle for a week. By then, all the residents of Fredericksburg had been ordered, suggested, by Confederate General Robert E. Lee to get out of town. And they did, but unfortunately, because the battle kept getting delayed, they filtered back in. Then, whoops, we're getting ready to fight again. They couldn't come into Stafford County, so they went into Spotsylvania. If they had a relative, fine. They probably stayed with them, or maybe in the barn, maybe in the manger. I don't know. But that's what was happening to people in Fredericksburg. The city was evacuated. And then, a day of fighting to cross the river, the first amphibious landing under fire in American military history. They then fought through the city streets, the Union Army, and tried to control the city. The first urban street fighting, think Baghdad, 2001. That was here. And then on the 13th, they charged in two places trying to break the Confederate line and didn't. And here's something that we have to sort of say, my goodness. In those 2 days, December 11th through the 13th, there were a total of 18,000 casualties. All right? How about this? That's 3 times the casualties that this country suffered on D-Day, 1944. And news of each of those casualties, and that's killed, wounded, missing, had to go into both Union and Confederate homes over the Christmas holidays. That's not great holiday cheer, is it? Lincoln said, if there's a place worse than hell, I'm in it. That's a quote. And we're in the middle of that today. To put in a little market connection, how about for 1.5 years, this area, Stafford, Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania, were home to 750,000 Union soldiers and Confederate soldiers. They suffered 100,000 casualties. And it was so devastating. By the way, forget grapevines, there were no trees here left. This area, Stafford, Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania, never recovered their 1860 census level until 1942. Now that had an effect on the market. And I think the only reason it bounced back by that point was World War II. That's really what I'm trying to say, that you're in the middle of all of that. And you know, human nature is awful. Oh, I've been there. I've done that. Well, this weekend, thanks to our local National Park staff and a group of over 2,000 reenactors, they're going to have lots of things happening from Friday through Sunday, and then again on the literal anniversary, the 11th and 13th. And you say, I don't like that history. Well, let me tell you, this is not simply a bang-bang, shoot-'em-up reenactment. On Sunday afternoon, you can walk with all of the National Park Service staff historians through the streets to the sites where certain things happen, and they're going to tell you not the boring stuff, ladies and gentlemen, but the stories. There will be a reenactment. There will be hospitals recreated. Chatham received over 6,000 Union casualties. 6,000. One end of it was the surgery, and of course surgery in 1862 meant one thing. And all of this was going on, and they're going to talk about all of this. And not in gruesome detail, but in stories I bet you'll remember. I will send Daryl a link, because the same media group is going to produce a DVD, but it can't be produced till it's over. I mean, the point being, we're going to record this. Because this is not the 100th anniversary celebration, it's the commemoration. Think what happened here 150 years ago. There are groups seeking to sort of save it. Yes, Historic Fredericksburg Foundation, HFFI, I being incorporated, works on saving the city. The Central Virginia Battlefields Trust, in fact, in yesterday's paper, talked about another 9 acres they've bought. Since 1996, they've purchased over 900 acres. And you can't save it all, but they're working to save your country's history, our country's history. And I encourage you to take part in that as much as you can. At least keep up with it in the Freelance Star. You know, it's hard to realize that what we have here today was not here then. I mean, you know, Route 17 didn't exist. This was the road to Warren. Right? Fredericksburg itself had 6,000 residents. Stafford had under 10,000. Spotsylvania had under 14,000. The majority of Spotsylvania's citizens were enslaved African Americans. About half of Stafford's were. I mean, it's just all of those stories are here. And we live in the middle of it, and darn it, we drive past it every day. What I would urge you to do is not to stop every day for a tour, but don't you want to be aware of it? This is our history. And I guess that's what I was asked to sort of highlight tonight.
Absolutely.
And thank you for the time. And as we have time later, I'll be glad to tell you more stories over here in the corner. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Kind of interesting to think back 150 years, isn't it? Let's think back 20 years. What were you doing 20 years ago? I can tell you I didn't expect to be standing right here. If you talk to some of these people with some of these stories that are going around, you know why. No, but really and truly, what Scott has done for us is kind of try to set the stage for what it was like back then. And nobody realizes what a center of commerce we were in the 1700s, because everybody thinks about the river the way the river is today. Well, things are constantly changing and moving and evolving. Just, you know, that's the way financial markets evolve as well. So, you know, I don't want to get up on my soapbox and sound all preachy, but what we're living through right now, in 20 years, we're going to look back and go, man, I was there. You know, you remember what the presidential election was like? The atmosphere, the climate 2 months ago, 3 months ago? I mean, we had people just, there's no way that guy's going to get back in office. And there were other people going, this guy's got to get back in office. And there were no, you know, shades of gray anywhere. It was either black or it was white, and it didn't matter which side you were on, you were not going to change your side. And I found that really kind of crazy. You know, we're Americans, so we're very resilient. And that's evident, you know, when we came back from the Battle of Fredericksburg. If you ever watched the Ken Burns documentary, which, I mean, I would encourage you to do that as well, and then go to Chatham and take a look at Fredericksburg and see what it looks like. Very similar. So they had to find a way. We had to get through it. We had to get around it. We had to get over it. There's a Clint Eastwood movie, I think, that had something like that with the Marine saying, you know, we want to go through it, around it, or over it, and that's how we conquer obstacles. Well, right now, I'm going to kind of open up the floor to some investment questions, because we've got a lot of obstacles that are out there right now. I know a lot of people are asking questions about, what do I do? Where do I go? What does this mean? What does that mean? And I'll kind of open the floor, and Marissa with Hartford and I will try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. What's the fiscal cliff, and how does it affect me? Yeah, and when you start talking about the economy, okay, there are two things that affect the economy with regard to money. Okay, one is monetary policy and the other is fiscal policy. Everybody, does anybody know the difference? If you can explain it to me, please. But monetary policy, everybody's heard of Ben Bernanke, right? Well, anybody know what he does other than get on TV? Well, basically what he is, he controls the money spigot in the United States. So by that, I mean he gets to control where money's flowing into and money's flowing out of and tries to keep it from being stagnant. So has anybody ever heard of QE3? Quantitative easing. Okay? Quantitative easing 3 means the Fed's going to spend more money to try to get more money out in the economy. What they are doing is they are basically artificially lowering interest rates to make money try to find its highest and best use. So if you're going to get 0.6 for 5 years in a CD in the bank, are you inclined to do that or try to invest in a growing winery operation? You know, if you could have gotten on the ground floor of this 15 years ago, 20, how long? 25? 23 years ago. Would you have done it? Anybody in here? Would you? If you'd have known what it has grown into now? It's a very easy decision looking back, right? The monetary policy now is we want to get money out of the banks and get it back into the economy. So what they've effectively done is push the prices of bonds way up, which pushes yields way down. And at some point, interest rates are going to have to flip-flop. Okay, so we now have prices at all-time highs. We have yields at all-time lows. Anybody have a guess where the bond market's going to go at some point? Got to go the other way, right? We have markets. Markets always move in cycles. So you have, you know, peaks and valleys, and then you've got the declining parts, and then you've got the increasing parts, and that's kind of how that wheel works. Well, the fiscal policy, or excuse me, the monetary policy right now is to try to incentivize people to take money out of banks. So you're starting, anybody know where the stock market is? What level it's at right now? Dow Jones Industrial Average? 12.5 roughly? Yeah. It's closer to 13, but I mean, that's at all-time highs. So we're starting to see a market move up. Nobody's really talking about that. What's everybody talking about? Everybody's talking about a fiscal cliff, right? All right, so the monetary policy says we want to get as much money out into the economy as we possibly can because we think that's going to create a more vibrant economy. All right, and then we had the fiscal policy. Anybody know what fiscal policy is versus monetary policy? Fiscal is about taxes. Okay, so fiscal, I want you to think in terms of this is what we do to bring money into the government, or this is what we do to try to repel money from the government. And then monetary policy is just the water spigot that kind of turns it on and off. And what we have with the fiscal cliff is essentially the Bush tax cuts stopping. Okay, when the tax cuts went into effect, we started to see growth in the economy. I don't know if you guys will recall that, but anytime in history, if you've ever gone back and studied economics, anytime that tax rates have been cut, we've actually seen growth. It's not immediate, but it happens over time. And that's because people are actually able to make decisions about your own money. Who in here would rather have somebody else making decisions about their own money than themselves? Would you like to be told where to spend your money? Anybody?
Yes, I want you to tell me.
Okay. That's the best answer all night. Thank you, Cornel. But really and truly, you don't want me telling you where to spend your money. If you want to go take a trip, go take a trip, right? Yeah, you don't want me to. Okay. No, I'm not Susie. But, well, you know, the payoffs come later on. When you make $1, what do you want to do with that dollar? You want to give it to somebody else and have them tell you where to spend it or not? We're Americans. We don't want anybody telling us what to do, right? Okay, so what happens with this fiscal cliff is we are now saying that the tax cuts that are in effect right now are going to go away, and we're going to revert back to where we were. Where we were with the state taxes, okay, was a $675,000 exemption. So when you have a family farm that's been in somebody's family for 40 years and they pass away, and the federal estate tax exemption is now $675,000 versus $5 million, and their farm is worth, say, $10 million, What's going to happen? Is little Johnny going to be able to step out and say, yeah, I'm going to pay 55% of that estate tax now out of his pocket? Most people don't have that. Anybody in here know how farmers operate? They borrow money. They hedge. When they get cash, they hang on to it until they need to go buy something. You know, that's a very unique kind of a mindset, because once they have that cash, they're going to go buy something, and they're going to invest, and they're going to put the money back in the land. If the money's in the land and the money's in the equipment, and all this land is sitting here, and they pass away, and there's no way to kind of mitigate that problem, what will happen? Kids are going to have to sell the assets, exactly. You think they're going to get a bargain? Money needs to be paid within about 18 months. So if somebody knows you're under pressure to sell something at a discounted price, are they going to be inclined to pay you more or pay you less? They'd be inclined to pay you less, right? Okay, so now you've got little Johnny, who is the heir apparent to this farm, now not being able to farm because he's had to sell it. And that's to be able to pay the tax, okay? And this is not a political discussion. What this is, these are facts with regard to the taxes. We are starting to see the estate tax exemption go away on the fiscal cliff. We're also starting to see tax rates go up. And I don't care who you are, you're going to start to see those changes happen. What this is going to incentivize people to do is to start protecting their assets with regard to taxes. So you'll see tax deferral becoming a kind of a buzzword. You'll see tax-free types of investments becoming more important. You're going to start seeing folks try to diversify their assets away from illiquid things. Illiquid things are land, equipment. Let's think of things like timber. You know, and you're going to start to see them move and change and morph. And you'll see, we've got business owners in this room. Does anybody in here like the new Obamacare mandate that's going down? I have a friend who lives in Virginia Beach who has 400 employees, offers health care to all 400 employees. They've already done the math. When this goes into effect, all 400 of those employees will now be uninsured. It's cheaper for them to pay the fine. You know, so there's a lot of stuff going on in Washington, D.C. that we're not really talking about too much other than this fiscal cliff, and everybody goes, what's the fiscal cliff? Fiscal cliff, it's very simple. It's a change in tax policy. So if you can just keep it that simple, it can be a lot more complex, as I've obviously gotten into. I ran down a couple of rat holes here while I was talking to you guys because it's so easy to do. I mean, I know a gentleman that owns a substantial amount of real estate, knows that it's going to penalize his family if anything happens to him. Won't do anything. It's like a deer stuck in the headlights. He's just sitting there going, well, yeah, I know it's bad, but it's too complicated. I'm not even going to mess with it. You know, and you start getting into that kind of thinking, we're really we're heading down a weird area. So, you know, number one, don't be scared of it. Try to educate yourself about it. You know, if you don't know what's going on, ask somebody. And I would ask, you know, somebody that has studied economics, has some background with regard to what's going on with politics, you know, so your local congressional aides might be able to give you a balanced approach if you call the Democrat and you call the Republican. I don't know. You're not going to get the truth from either one of them. Everybody know that? What are they going to tell you? They're going to tell you what you want to hear. All right, but ultimately what you have to do is to figure out, how's this going to affect me? What do I do to get around it or over it or through it? And that's what we're doing as financial advisors right now, is kind of looking at people going, well, you know what? There's some planning that you can do if you're willing to do it. But, you know, we've got a very short window right now. And there are a lot of folks that are trying to close a lot of deals. Why are you trying to close those deals? Because capital gains tax rates are at 15% right now. If they change where they go up to 39%, where they used to be, and you've got something that you've held for 20 years and it's suddenly worth 200% more than what you paid for it, well, now you're penalized for essentially hanging on to an asset for too long. So, you know, think in those terms. That is, in essence, what the fiscal cliff is just a change in tax policy. But you're also seeing that being married to a huge change in our monetary policy as well. When they start saying QE3 is going to last through the year 2014, that means interest rates are going to stay low for a very long time. Anybody got any money in a bank? Feels good to have it in the bank, right? Get that statement. They haven't started giving us minus signs yet on the interest. But you know, that's not too far away because we've actually gotten minus signs on T-bills. T-bills have had negative yields. They don't do it all the time. I'm sorry? Yeah. And you know why people are willing to know they're going to lose money? Because they know how much they're going to lose. So it's all about risk. It's all about how do you manage risk, how do you avoid risk, how do you transfer risk. So keep all that in mind as well. What do you do is you want to, number one, manage your tax exposure. Okay, your tax exposure is going to be based on, okay, can I defer this to a later time? Well, tax deferral may not be the best thing to do at this point. Because if you're deferring tax and you're at a 15% tax rate now, but you're going to defer into a point where now tax rates might be 75%, well, you've effectively shot yourself in the foot. Okay, so there are things that you can do, like you can convert some tax deferred assets. Okay, tax deferral just means you're going to pay tax at some point. All right, so a traditional IRA would be a great tax deferred item. You can convert that into a Roth, or at least a portion of it into a Roth, pay the tax on it now, and then at some point in the future, you've got a tax-free asset, which is the Roth. Everybody follow that? I'm sorry, I probably should have brought a whiteboard tonight. But that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to look at tax-free investments. Many of you have been exposed to tax-free investments, and we've done extremely well. Why have we done well? Because people are afraid of taxes. We used to say poor. We really did. I mean, it's not bad to be poor. You know, as long as you got good character, you can start to work your way out of that. So those are places to kind of look. They're not for everybody. In the past, we've done better. In the past, we've done worse. At some point, this will all change. Okay, we're also starting to see the stock market inch up. The market does what we call climbing the market, the wall of worry. Anybody ever heard that term? Everybody's all worried. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the market keeps going up, and nobody can explain why. What you're starting to see is a change in assets. You're starting to see people move into real assets, tax-protected types of assets, shorter duration assets. In fact, I was sitting in a client meeting yesterday, and we were talking about that exact subject. In order to manage your risk, if you've got a teeter-totter, okay, and you've got 30 years of teeter-totter, a big move on one side makes a big move on the other side, right? Well, the shorter your teeter-totter, the less dramatic the moves are. And that's how you can kind of protect yourself a little bit as well. Because I'm watching all the talking heads, and the talking heads are basically saying, okay, we're going to go off the cliff. We're going to have some sort of a mediated settlement, for lack of a better term, where there's going to be some give and take. And then we've got another one that says there's a long-term resolution. It's like a shell game. Who wants to bet on which side? What's your question? Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting. A lot of folks are predicting that if we do go over the cliff, that you will see I hesitate to call it a crash, but you will see a small correction in the market. And then you'll see everybody kind of gather themselves and go, oh, well, this is where we are, and then move forward. So I don't think it's going to be calamitous ultimately. It will be very upsetting in the very short run because it's a fundamental change. If you think about what the markets did when the tax cuts initially were implemented, people did the same thing. It's almost like breaking through a plate glass of window. You break through and you wonder if you got cut, you kind of look around, you watch all the glass settle around you, and then you go, oh, well, I can step here and not get cut, or here, and you'll start to see investment professionals will start to pick their way through that. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. What we want to do, first of all, is we don't want you to get hurt when you run through that plate glass. And number two, let's have a plan for getting out of it. So, oh man, it's happened, now what? I think you saw that with the election. Did anybody watch what the market did the day after the election? It was a huge overreaction. I don't know if you guys ever read the blog stuff I write, but I write it and then I post it out there. We were down about 210 points within 10 minutes of me sitting down to start to write this stuff. And I thought it was a blatant overreaction. We've since recovered, and it's because we're trying to find a way through it. Jim started this business right here. He didn't build this. If you look at that comment, and I'm going, okay, well, you know what? I can almost see where he says, okay, the roads were built so you get a road to go somewhere to get, to this location. Okay, I can understand that. But if you've never signed the front of a paycheck, it's very difficult to quantify to somebody what the risk is, how you might not sleep at night. You've got to analyze what your business risks are, what your client risks are, what the economy's like. So there's a lot to it. And I, have been in a lot of different places with regard to my career, and I've been very fortunate and very successful and blessed. But it's a whole different ballgame. When you are the person out there making sure everybody gets paid, that's a big deal because you've got families, in your hands. And I'm sorry, I got up on my soapbox there a little bit. That has absolutely nothing to do with the market. That has a lot to do with us trying to get ahead and move forward. If you understand some of the discourse that's coming out of D.C., 98% of all businesses make less than $250,000 a year. Does anybody believe that? You believe 98% make less than $250,000? You couldn't run this place if y'all brought in less than $250,000. I'm not talking about your adjusted gross. I mean, think about that. You can't run a. Well, let's just say that you're an electrician. You want to run a shop and you've got 5 guys to pay. Think about your materials and everything else. You literally cannot run a business on that. Yet they're saying 98% make less than that. So, it's one of those deals where you need to pay attention to what's being said, analyze it, and listen to it and go, does that make sense or does it not make sense? If it makes sense, by all means, let's go forward. If it doesn't make sense, let's figure out a way around it. Any other questions with regard to what we're talking about? I know fiscal cliff is probably not the sexiest thing. Yes, ma'am. Well, I'm not going to talk about your account specifically in front of everybody. It pays you 5%, which is $5,000 a year. Okay, right now it's being taxed at 15%. So I don't know, what is that number? It's a little less than $1,000, right? Okay, so you're paying $750 in taxes on $5,000 of income. If you get taxed at ordinary income tax rates and you are in the 39.6% tax bracket, suddenly you're getting taxed at almost 40%. So you're being taxed $2,000 to $750. So that's going to hurt. If people are depending on that for income, that can hurt. So the fiscal cliff it's a very real threat, but it's not ultimately something that is going to stop people from investing. If you still like Altria and you still believe in the fact that people still need income, so they'd like to have that dividend, but you also believe that people are going to still smoke in other places, they're going to smoke around here. People have been addicted to that. They're also going to buy all the other products that Altria makes. They used to own Kraft Foods. It used to be that they would own Oscar Mayer, Philip Morris, and Miller Beer. And I thought that was the greatest vice stock in the world. Because you could buy that and then you can go out and get drunk on the weekend and eat a bologna sandwich. But that way you were actually putting money back in your own pocket. Because I thought that, I'm sorry, that was kind of, but I think ultimately the growth in those companies will incentivize people to continue to invest in them. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, and I do that intentionally because I want everybody to see the whole picture. We do what we call 52 cards face up. So we want you to see all the cards, and then we make the decisions in terms of where we want to play them. Because we could be 100% in a tax-free investment that is totally unsuitable for you. Wouldn't make any sense whatsoever because you've got a 20-year time horizon. You really need to see this money grow. Tax-free investments are not designed to grow. They're designed to pay you an income and then pay you off. That's like building hospitals or roads or sewer systems or anything of that nature. There's lots of different ways to skin the cats. ultimately you might have to change. And that, or you might have to just suck it up and pay the tax, because that's going to be the way to go. That's how we go through it instead of around it. Oh, absolutely. That's just what we do, is we try to analyze your portfolio and we have something called Know Your Customer. That's our standard of care, meaning that we need to know who you are, where your money came from, what your goals are for these funds, and what your risk tolerance is. Okay, and all those factors are very important. It sounds very easy for me to say, but they're very important because they all kind of blend together. And it might be that you are 100% in the perfectly suitable, appropriate investment and still lose money, because it happens. You know, and it's almost like we are managing a football team for you guys as owners. You know, you own the team. You're Dan Snyder. And I'm, what's his name, Alan? So I'm the general manager, but I've now picked Shanahan, who's got to put these players in the game. Last night he did a pretty good job, right? Does it happen all the time? No. So if your general manager's not doing his job, you fire him. If the coach is not doing his job, I fire him, because he's got to get the players in the game. All right, so that comes into the advice question. And I would really encourage you, when we send out an email with regard to LPL economic commentary, take a look at it. Those guys are great. They look at it from 30,000 feet, and then they start to drill down, which is exactly the way I manage as well. You guys know, when you have assets, what we do is we take all of your assets and we combine them into this big picture of you. But it's only one component of you. This doesn't encompass who your kids are. You know who your kids are. What we do is use this tool of your assets to make you be able to help them as much as you possibly can. And I'm sorry, I jumped up on my soapbox again. But you'll see, I mean, they're very simple subjects. They're just not easy. It's like anything else. I mean, we all know how to play blackjack, right? Try to get as close to 21 without going over as you possibly can. How many in here have actually won at blackjack consistently? Nobody, right? It's a very simple game. It's just not easy to do. And that's because a lot of the odds are stacked against you. So what we have to do is to try to reduce the odds that are stacked against you as much as we can. The only way that we can do that is by analyzing what the information is at hand and try to figure out where do we go from here upon it. What happens when you get a little extra money? Anybody save it? Everybody spends it, don't they? You get used to it. So if you're making an extra $500 because you're getting a stipend that you weren't used to getting before, well, it tends to affect your lifestyle. And then you become dependent on that. And if that money's coming from a government entitlement, any type of a government program, you've now become dependent on the government. That's dangerous, guys. And I tell you, we have a whole country that's founded on the fact that they did not want to be dependent on a government. They wanted to be dependent on what they could do as individuals. Nobody could say it any better than Martin Luther King said it. He didn't say, I want you to pull everybody else down to make me equal. He said, I just want an equal chance because I've got these wonderful abilities. And think about that when you start to think about what the politicians are doing out there. Because politicians, their ultimate goal, again, is to get your vote. Okay? Your vote is the same as somebody else's vote. And that person may say, well, I want this, so give me this and I'll vote for you. And what you may be saying is, don't give me anything, but just don't take anything away. And it could be just that easy, but it's just that complicated. So, this is a holiday party. Let's talk about some fun subjects.
Who made those pies?
I'm telling you what, Ginger made those pies. Did you like them?
I want more.
Okay. Please compliment Ginger on those pies. She also made the meatballs. She worked with Bev in setting this entire thing up. Bev and Jim and their staff made the place look beautiful. I mean, I can't thank you guys enough for being here and enjoying this with us. We've enjoyed a great year. We actually doubled in size in the year 2012. And thank you. But, don't clap for me. It's you guys. Y'all made that happen. You trust us with your assets. You refer other people to us that would depend on that as well. And And we can't thank you enough. That's not something we can buy. It's something that we have to earn. And we've been very fortunate. We hope that in 2013 we'll have even more people here. You know, and I'm not talking about just clients. I'm talking about staff. We want to grow. If you hear financial advisors that are out there that share our similar philosophies, where we want to have all 52 cards face up and we want to help people, rather than, hey, we want to make money, because those are two competing philosophies. We always believe if we're doing the right thing, we're going to make money. So that's, I mean, it's few and far between to find those people. But if you see them, please let them know we're out here, because you know they don't typically knock on our doors. They're trying to knock on yours. But I do again want to thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? I don't want to shut anybody down, but you know, feel free. Eat some more cheesecake. Eat some more meatballs. Eat some more chicken. Have some more wine. Enjoy yourselves. Have a very Merry Christmas. Have a great 2013. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know.
Is that a lucky year or unlucky?
It's going to be very lucky. 2013, we're going to make our own luck. So we're looking forward to it.